We're really happy to see so many people here tonight to induct some outstanding social workers into the California Social Work Hall of Distinction. It is a way of recognizing those who've made major contributions not only to the profession of social work, but also to the communities, perhaps most important to the communities. We've got educators, practitioners, micro, macro practitioners. We've got the whole gamut of social workers here to be recognized. So again, we appreciate the support and attention that we're getting from all those around.
I'm Dworak-Peck, and I'm so happy to be here today. One of the most important reasons for having a Hall of Distinction is giving peers an opportunity to recognize our best. And recognition by one's peers is the highest and most meaningful recognition ever received. And every time I come here, it reminds me of why I became a social worker. And I think it reinvigorates my feelings about the profession, about my colleagues, and our clients. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
I am so pleased to be here today at the 2018 California Hall of Distinction induction ceremonies. This is the highlight of social work events in California every year, and I'm so happy it's always conducted in conjunction with the National Association of Social Workers Annual Conference, California Annual Conference. So I get a chance to meet all the wonderful inductees, and I learn something new every year, and I actually look very forward to coming to this event so I can reacquaint myself with former colleagues who are now either retired or inducted in the hall, and new people who I didn't know before, but when I hear their stories here, I am so impressed. So I'm going to really give a great congratulations to all the inductees.
This is one of the most important events in our profession. You know, we have the Academy Awards, we have the Hall of Fame, and the Academy Awards, people are given awards for acting. Today we're honoring people that actually do the hard work of making things better for our community and our nation. We have the Hall of Fame where people are recognized for playing a game. The people that today we're recognizing are not playing games, they're actually doing really work that are making the lives better for children, adults, families in our nation. It's an honor to be here. This is probably one of the most elite events of our profession and in our community.
Hello and welcome, welcome. My name is Colleen Friend and I'm the chair of the committee on the Hall of Distinction, and I'm also the interim director of the California State LA School of Social Work. So I want to welcome you here today, and I have several things we need to do before I introduce the Mistress of Ceremonies. So first I'd like to acknowledge and welcome my fellow members of the committee who are here today. So I'd like to ask them to stand to be acknowledged, and I'd like to ask you to hold your applause until they all stand, and then we'll acknowledge them. So first off, Francis Capel. Francis, I know I saw you. Okay, you got to hold it to the very end. I know Francis is very applause-worthy. She is. We acknowledge that. Okay, but we got to get through it. Okay, Suzanne Dworak-Peck. All great people. Esther Gillies. Peter Lee. Joseph Nunn. Catherine Ralph. I know I saw you. And Janley Wong. Please acknowledge the committee members. Thank you. We, as a committee, are excited to launch, the first time ever, we have an online auction. I understand that you have flyers at the table, and you also have on the inside of your program the description of many of the things that we have for auction. So this auction started at 12 o'clock today, and it's going to continue for 2 weeks. So please email it to your friends, and please, please bid up the auction items today. because we would like to make some money for the Hall of Distinction, and we have a lot of wonderful things. For example, one of the inductees today, who, Yasuko Sakamoto, she actually made 2 items. She made 2 collages that are framed, and they have themes of social work on them. The first one is talking about heart, affection, courage, and compassion, and the other one is about listening. So these collages involve social work values, and I'm sure that all of you will want them. And we have other priceless things like a weekend villa in Malibu, and tickets to the Jimmy Kimmel Live Green Room, and tickets to the HBO Real Time with Bill Maher, and we all know that social workers need some rest and relaxation. So we hope you will bid on these priceless items as well as the collages and the many other things that are available here at the auction. Okay, I want to acknowledge previous inductees who are here with us tonight. So again, I'll ask them to stand as I call their name, and please hold your applause until all of them are standing. I know they're all applause worthy. First up, Ken Nakamura. Second up, Alex Norman. Third, David Kuroda. Fourth, Jane Kurihara. Fifth, Barbara Solomon. And last but not least, we're expecting Fernando Torres-Gil any moment. So let's acknowledge these inductees. Thank you. And speaking of Fernando Torres-Gil, I would like you to look in your programs. In the middle of your programs, we have a description of our leadership exercise. So for those of you that teach, this leadership exercise that involves the Hall of Distinction is a wonderful exercise to use with your classroom. And for no extra charge, Fernando Torres-Gil gave us a wonderful endorsement of it, and it's available at our website, and might give you some ideas about how he used it to help his students understand the history of social work in California. So I'd like to also thank our event sponsors. Now I have some clusters in which I want to recognize our event sponsors, and I'm happy to say that this is a record number of event sponsors, so thank you very much. We appreciate in an age of austerity and difficulty with getting the money to do that, that many of you still come through and sponsor our event. We're very appreciative of that. So first off, I'd like to acknowledge the private universities. So first up, we have Atlantic Pacific University, Azusa Pacific University, Loma Linda University, as well as USC, and we have Susan Dworak-Peck here representing them. So that's the private universities. Then we have several CSUs who have been sponsors, and we really appreciate that. For CSUs, we have CSU East Bay, and we have Diane Rush Woods here representing them. We have CSU Fresno. We have CSU Fullerton as a sponsor, and CSU Long Beach, and we have Nancy Meyer-Adams here today, who's the program director and representing them. Thank you, Nancy. And then my school, Cal State LA, and we have several students and faculty members here, so thank you for coming. Then we have as a sponsor CSU Sacramento, CSU San Diego, CSU San Francisco, and San Jose State, with Peter Lee as the director. He is here. So let's acknowledge them. We also want to thank our support from the UC system. So we have UC Berkeley as a sponsor, and we have Kathy Ralph, a recent retiree, and she's here. So Kathy. We have the USC Luskin School, and we have Laura Abrams here, and she's the director. And speaking of UCLA, we really want to give a shout out to the students who are here instead of the Dodgers game. So thank you, students. Thank you very much. And we also want to thank VC Powell. We want to thank you, the Executive Director of External Programs and Career Services, for collaborating with us on this event. Thank you. Okay, let's acknowledge them. Thank you. Next up, we have a few organizational sponsors, and we're also appreciative of them and their sponsorship. That's right. Okay. So I think that was anticipating the California Deans and Directors of Social Work Schools. Then we have near and dear to my heart, California Social Work Education Center, aka CalSWIC. And we also have the Child and Family Policy Institute of California, the National Association of Social Workers Foundation, and also the National Association of Social Workers California chapter under the directorship of Jan Lee Wong, who is here today. So let's thank them for being sponsors. Thank you. This is really important because we could not put this event on without sponsors, so we continue to appreciate your patronage and your sponsorship. Next, we're grateful to individuals who have decided to become sponsors. So there are several people who have joined me as a sponsor, and they are as follows. So I'm going to ask them to also stand. Esther Gillies, who is here. Dr. Jim Kelly is also a sponsor. David Kubota is here, and he's a sponsor. Nancy Yim Lee is a sponsor. She's also on our committee. Ken Nakamura, thank you for sponsoring. You're a sponsor too. Suzanne Dworak-Peck is here, and she's a sponsor. And let me see, do I have anybody else? But no, but that's us. Thank you very much for being a sponsor. Appreciate that. Individual sponsors. Now I'd like to bring up someone who probably needs no introduction here. This is Esther Gillies, and she is the president of the California Social Welfare Archives. And Esther has had a career in social work for 50 years. Can anybody believe that? 50 years. How did that happen? But Esther has had a terrific career in social work as a child welfare practitioner, as a program developer, and also as an agency administrator. And then she went over to USC, where she was a clinical associate professor, and she's since retired from that, but she remains the director of our California Social Welfare Archives. So let's welcome our Mistress of Ceremonies, Esther Gillies.
When I receive an introduction like that, I always find myself stopping and looking around. Who's been a social worker for 50 years? Who is that person? It's unbelievable. I counted up today. It really has been 52 years. To begin, and I guess this is my assignment because I've been around for so long, I'd like to tell you a bit about the California Social Welfare Archives, the CSWA. It's the organization responsible for the Social Work Hall of Distinction and the induction ceremony that we're celebrating today. Almost 40 years ago, an informal group of social workers, very active professionally in the 1950s and the 1960s at USC, became concerned about the legacy of their generation of social workers. They were aging, retirement was in sight, they were concerned, they posed questions. What if all the advances achieved in social welfare during this prolific time fade away and are forgotten? What if the theories, knowledge, and understanding achieved by our generation are lost to future social workers and social welfare advocates in our state? What can we do to ensure that advances made in our time remain available to inform decisions and planning of future social welfare and social justice legislation, programs, and services? This small group, led by George Nickel and Francis Lomas Feldman, to name just two, took action, typical of social workers. We like to talk. We definitely like to talk, but we're also action-oriented, and that's what they did. In 1979, they formed the CSWA. At first operating as an informal group, they began collecting and preserving documents and personal histories related to social issues and to the problems that were being addressed in health and welfare in California. Over time, the CSWA has evolved into a statewide nonprofit organization, and today operates under the auspices of the USC Suzanne Dworak-Peck School of Social Work and is affiliated with the USC Special Collections Library. The mission of the CSWA remains to collect, preserve, and make available documents and personal histories illuminating the emergence of social issues and problems in health and welfare in California. And not only the problems, but the solutions that were tried in that particular era. Too often, if you've been around for 50 years, to which I can attest, you find that what was done in 1980 worked, but got lost. We don't do it anymore. Why? It worked then. You know, we could pull it out, polish it off, spiff it up a bit, add some technology, and it might work again. We also collect materials on programs that didn't work. Too often, as this observer of the cycle of helping in our state, I see us try again to do something that I know we did in 1969. We tried it again in 1982. Didn't work either time. Why are we trying it again? It's because we've lost our history. So today, to achieve our mission, the CSWA is active in several areas. We collect documents with historical significance, and we preserve them in the USC Special Collections Library. And every time I read that phrase, David, I think of you. David did a promo video for us some years ago, David Kubota. There you are, David. And he said, my grandfather had some wonderful family stories and told us some wonderful things about our family history. But my grandfather is gone, and we never wrote it down. We never preserved it, and it may be lost to future generations of our family. Very, very powerful assessment of the need to capture some of our history and make it available to future generations. We conduct oral history interviews with individuals and groups who've made valuable contributions to social welfare in California. We have over 160 interviews, both audio and video, with social workers from across the state that are available for viewing on, believe it or not, took us a while to get here, but they are on YouTube. And they're also in the USC Digital Library. Since its inception in 2002, we have inducted into the California Social Work Hall of Distinction individuals who've made significant and enduring contributions to California social work. Biographies and oral histories can be found on the Hall of Distinction webpage. We also videotape the induction ceremonies and other CSWA events. Today is being videotaped. As you can see, the camera is visible. You're all on tape. This will be on YouTube within the next week or two, so you can go see yourself, as I think you do pan and you capture everybody that's in the group. So, being saved for posterity. We post these materials in various places to make them widely available. The websites for our oral histories, videotaped events can be found on Learn More, the page in the middle of your program, which gives you access to all avenues of connection to the CSWA. I think Colleen told you I'm going to be the acting mistress of ceremonies, but my notes say, tell people you're the mistress of ceremonies, so I'm the mistress of ceremonies today. I will be making general introductions, introducing presenters, and moving the program along during the next hour and a half or so. We could spend a whole evening honoring each of our inductees, but tonight we have the challenge to show our respect to all 6 of them. For more information about each one, we've provided a summary, which is in your program booklet. The brief comments from the podium are intended to enhance those materials. We have asked each presenter and honoree to limit their remarks to about 5 minutes. You can say a lot in 5 minutes if you just condense, condense, condense. And in my MC role tonight, I am tasked with being the enforcer on that. So if you see me in your peripheral vision coming your way, make like this is the orchestra music at the Academy Awards, okay? Please know it is past time to wrap up. Thank you for your understanding. The 2018 inductees into the California Social Work Hall of Distinction have all earned a Master of Social Work degree, a requirement for membership in the Hall. They were nominated by social workers and others working in the area of social welfare from across California. Nominations are reviewed and inductees are selected by the Hall of Distinction Committee, composed of social workers from throughout the state, from San Diego to Chico in the north, and representing academia, research, administration, individual and group practice, and all areas across the broad spectrum of social work practice in California. For the many nominations submitted, 6 were selected for induction into the Hall of Distinction this year. So let's begin. As our first presenter tonight, I would like to welcome to the podium Dr. Joe Nunn. I saw Joe earlier. Joe, there you are. Joe is Professor Emeritus, UCLA Luskin Department of Social Welfare, and the new Vice President of NASW California.
I guess since I'm introducing the first inductee, I'm kind of the leadoff hitter, given this World Series time. And as the leadoff hitter, I'm going to hit a home run because I have the honor of introducing Mr. Wilfred Coggins, also known as Bill. I've known Bill a long time. I've known him as a friend, a colleague, a social worker, and I've known him as the executive director of the Kaiser Watts Counseling and Learning Center. And I've also had an opportunity recently to introduce him when he received the Alumnus of the Year Award at UCLA last May. And I interviewed him for the oral history, histories for the archive about a couple of weeks ago. Bill is an interesting guy who grew up in Harlem. He's also Bayesian. He spent time in Barbados. And one of the things he said when I interviewed him is that as a youngster, one of his teachers came up and they saw something in him. But that seemed to be a recurrent theme throughout his career, that people saw that he had something special. He went and got his MSW at UCLA in 1955. And he talks about being the only African American in a fairly small class. And I remember when UCLA had its 50th anniversary of the program, members of Bill's class, along with Bill, came to the event. And they had a class song. My class didn't have a song. We were out picketing and carrying signs, but we didn't have a song. The 60s were quite a time. I used to joke with my students. I said, you know, when we're in the nursing home and we're, you know, just sitting there like this, just come up and whisper 60s in our ear and we'll go, yeah, yeah. A time of change, civil rights movement, assassinations, Martin Luther King, John F. Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, a little bit later. But yet, people thought that we could make things happen, that we thought that, you know, it was possible to make things better. Bill was hired by the Kaiser Foundation, and his office was, I think, up around Sunset Boulevard. And right after the Watts Rebellion, I tend to use the term rebellion, the press will call it the Watts riots. Bill had the assignment of trying to do something. And so he got in his car, he left his office, and he spent time in the Watts community talking to people. And gradually, to make a long story short, he went from operating out of the back of his car to actually helping to build a wonderful facility now at the corner of 103rd and Success Avenue. Kind of interesting, 103rd and Success. Bill knew that in order to be successful, he had to bring the community in. There was a mother's group, Sweet Alice was very much a part of that. He also reached out to youngsters because Kaiser was available, by the way. It wasn't just to Kaiser members. It was open to anyone in the community that needed assistance. When I was interviewing Bill, I asked about a program I remember called Kids Can Cope for children whose parents were ill and maybe terminal with cancer. And Bill got kind of misty because it brought up memories of his own in terms of a loss. And it just goes to show you that he had such great compassion for these kids who were going through something very difficult. The other thing that impressed me is that every year they would have a big event at graduation time to recognize youngsters, not just when they finished high school or college, but for each level along the way. Graduation of elementary school, middle school, high school, college, and our MSW students that were assigned to that agency were also recognized. Kaiser Watts Learning Center was a great field placement, offered excellent experiences for our students. Now, Bill's probably tired of me telling this story, but one of the things I remember about Bill is walking behind him through Kaiser Watts Learning Center, and he's picking up paper along the way. He told me when I interviewed him that actually he was out in front of his building picking up paper one time, and one of the neighbors said, "We know you, we're watching you. You're the kind of man we need in our neighborhood." Bill is the kind of man that Watts needed. He's the kind of man that social work needed. He's the kind of man that definitely deserves to be inducted into the California Social Work Hall of Distinction. Bill?
Who was he talking about? I need to stick to my roadmap because people know I can talk. First off, I want to thank the archives for existing. Not only existing, but I have a brief notion of what it takes to keep a place alive, to keep an institution alive. So thank you, archives. Thank you to the committee. Thank you to the board of directors. Thanks, Joe, for interviewing me. And Martha Watson, sitting in the back. Martha nominated me. But if I can take a slight detour, something that's long, long overdue. Martha and the staff was with me when the 1992 civil unrest, riots, rebellion, however you want to visualize it or conceptualize it, broke out. We had to work out something to get the payroll to staff because I told everybody to go home. But Martha stuck with me. I did not ask her. And baby, I'll never forget that. So also I want to thank Martha for many years. She actually worked at the center twice. But while she was there, she managed two programs. The early childhood education program and the counseling program, and had the credentials to do both. So Martha, in public, right now, thank you. You know, I'm going to have to make a deeply personal confession. I'm a groupie. I say that jokingly, but it begins with group. Mother-child, husband-wife. Those are some tough groups. And I say that because I see many groups here with whom I have connections. And it's a testimony to the existential fact that you can't do much without a group. You can't do it by yourself. You have to collaborate. You have to have alliances. Maybe some people can be isolated and somehow float through life, but I'm a groupie. On that note, I don't want to take too much time, but I would like to introduce some of the people who travel very far in order to be here, in no particular order. In front of me is Roger Clay, MSW JD. He was the second MSW I hired. And how long ago was that, 1968? Yeah. And Roger lives in Oakland. He's had a very distinguished career in law and in social work. And he's found a way to weld them together. I have my two cousins from Brooklyn, Rosalind Jameson, Connie Goss. They flew in to provide support and family witness. And then my globe-trotting university professor cousin, I can't resist telling a little story. When I was on my way to London on the Queen Mary, my cousin Drew, whom I'm about to introduce, came up to me and says, "Cousin Willie, can I go aboard that ship?" I said, "I don't know." I said, "I'll find out." They said, "Okay, as long as he gets off the ship in time." I said, "No problem. He's a compliant kid." He shot up that gangplank and ended up a commander in the Navy. So my cousin Drew is here from Hong Kong because he's a globetrotter. And of course, my wife is sitting here, a battle-scarred veteran of many years. Together, we hang tough. My wife, June. And last but not least, my buddy, I've known since he was 7 years old. He's an old-timer now. He's old like me. Lucky Stuart. Wright, Stuart Wright. I know there are also folks from Kaiser. I saw Maria, the president-director of the Counseling and Learning Center, Carol Simeon, who used to work there, and there's a whole bunch of Kaiser Watts Counseling and Learning people back there. Kathy Song, Martha Watson, who else? Dolores Hill, they're all back there. Thank you all for being present. I think I'm out of my time. Bye.
Now, you heard Joe tell us that they have done an oral history of Bill, and so this was just a touch. You'll have to go in and see what's the rest of the story. Is that history is about an hour long, Joe? I think something. At least an hour. At least an hour. At least an hour. Okay. Our next presenter is someone you've already been introduced to today, Dr. Colleen Friend. Colleen is a professor and the interim director of School of Social Work at Cal State LA and the past director of the Child Abuse and Family Violence Institute there. Welcome, Colleen.
Hi, everybody. I made this nomination of Kathy Kubota, and it's going to be hard to summarize her accomplishments in 5 minutes, but I'll give it a shot. And if you'd like to know more about it, which I urge you to do, I interviewed Kathy for our Hall of Distinction, and it's actually up on the web right now, so I urge you to look at that. But first off, Kathy made great use of her MSW time at UCLA, And at UCLA, she was placed for her first-year placement at Hillsides, and she was with John Hitchcock, who is here today, her first field education director for her placement. And her second placement was at United Way. And this was great for launching Kathy into thinking that she really wanted to have a career in children's services. Next, she went to go work directly at the Department of Children and Family Services, although it was not called that at that time. But she went to go work there, and she actually volunteered at Parents United, which served children who had been sexually abused, and that's where Esther and I first met Kathy. Just before she went to DCFS and went to adoptions, or somewhere in there, in that mix, she was called to actually become the sort of takeover director for the LA County Runaway Adolescent Pilot Program, and we were big into acronyms then, and that was called RAP. So some of you might remember RAP. But when she was at RAP, she collaborated with Gary Yates from Children's Hospital to develop this network of coordinating council for child-serving agencies for runaway youth. And at that time, I know it wouldn't be a surprise to know that youth were being sexually exploited on the streets of Hollywood, and so she developed a consortium with people who are competing for a very small pot of money. And this has been sort of a trait of Kathy's in her career. So from RAP, Kathy went back to the adoptions position, and then she was tapped in 1991 to come back to UCLA because she was the first director of what was the Inter-University Consortium. So the Inter-University Consortium was the parallel to CalSWIC. CalSWIC was being developed at UC Berkeley, and we were developing our own Title IV-E program here in LA County, and Kathy was its first director. And the first three schools that collaborated on this were USC, UCLA, and Cal State Long Beach. And although we take that collaboration for granted in these days with other universities, we were getting, or she was getting, 3 rival universities to come together in 1991. So this was very, very hard work. It's paid off, and the successor to the IUC is the UCCF, the University Consortium for Children and Families, which many of us know about, who trains all of our children's social workers for their career. And so this has become a model across the country of Title IV-E collaboration. From there, Kathy was named the DCFS Director of Governmental Relations under the then director, Peter Degree, and she was one of the few people to get an actual gold star from Peter Degree. So those of you who are around in that day, you know what that meant. So she had an outstanding performance, and I'm just going to highlight a couple of things from Kathy's time there because I think it's really important to think about that. First of all, she was she helped introduce Senate Bill 63, which allowed wraparound services to be engaged in by private nonprofits under contract. And although we take that for granted now, that was one of the first times that private nonprofits entered the world of child protection. So this was really important because it brought them into this service. And secondly, she was really, she's going to be humble about this, but I'm going to tell you, she was the principal architect of preventing Title IV-E, which was an entitlement, from being block granted to the states. And although many of us say, okay, yeah, okay, but at that time, that was very much in danger. And we all know what happens to projects that get block granted to the states. They get subsumed in the state budget, and nobody knows where the money went. So the service ends. And so it's really important to think about that because this saving of Title IV-E did more for us in terms of child welfare training, and also she was a pioneer in getting exemptions to Title IV-E, you know, and allowing Title IV-E to stand as it was and be utilized with modification by the various different counties. In 1997 to 1998, Kathy was named as, and she won the election for the president of that term of NASW. And this was a daunting time for her because this is when Ellen Dunbar was going out. By the way, Ellen is in the Hall of Distinction. And Janley Wong was just coming in. So thanks to Kathy, who also pioneered the use of training for NASW for mandated reporters who were obligated to report child abuse, dependent adults, adult abuse. She pioneered that, and that became a model for other associations of social workers across the country. But between Kathy and Janley Wong coming in, we now have the NASW as we know it. In her retirement, Kathy's done a lot of things. She served on the board of El Nido, and she also is a volunteer at Descanso Gardens. But in sum, I want to say that Kathy has had a distinguished career of bringing together competing organizations and getting them to commit to common social work goals. She's also advocated for Title IV funding to remain as we know it, and it's all been utilized by all the schools of social work across California. So it's been a wonderful thing to have that preserved for child welfare training for career launching. So for all these reasons and many more that you can read in the bibliography and go online and see, I think Kathy's a worthy inductee into the Hall of Distinction.
Take it on. This is so wonderful.
Thank you, everybody that's here, and especially to Colleen and Esther. Colleen's work in nominating me, I'm still not convinced that I did anything like that, but I was really fortunate. Actually, my career with LA County started in 1968 when I was fresh out of undergraduate school at UCLA. And like many of my cohorts who went to work for the county at that time, we all vowed that we would not be there longer than 5 years. And I worked for 32 and retired early. But I was lucky in my career at DCFS to have a lot of opportunities that allowed me to move from area to area. So I never really stayed with any position for longer than maybe 3 or 4 years, and some even less. One of my favorites, of course, was when I took a leave of absence and went to work at UCLA. And I was just visiting with Paul Carlo this morning, or this afternoon, and we reminisced a little bit about how well we really did get along. We never really felt any competition, and we did get that training program up and going. Our director of the department at the time, Peter DeGree, was not a patient man, and he did not want to wait to have the training program put up through CalSWEC. So he went ahead and had us, he made an agreement with the deans and directors of the 3 schools of social work, and there we were. Shortly afterwards, I was only there for 2 years, and the acting dean, I think, well, she may have been the dean, Rosina Becerra, was a little dismayed that I should leave so early because, you know, most of the faculty stay around for longer than that. The students leave in 2 years, but the faculty tends to stay longer. But I was asked to return to DCFS to assume the position of Director of Governmental Relations, and that's the job I held for the last 10 years of my career. It was an exciting experience. I do have to thank my husband because actually it wasn't nepotism, I promise, but he did have the job before me. But he's the one who was creative enough to think of ways to utilize the public funds for training MSWs for public social work. And I think it's been a giant benefit to all of us to not only have the opportunity to get the education with a subsidy, but then to have a career if you choose to go into public social work or, to move on to another type of service. I'm very nervous. But I'm delighted to be here today to see all the people that I haven't seen for so many years now. I've been retired since the year 2000. And it's just, I've had so much fun meeting and working with so many people from the private sector, from the schools, from the public sector, and people who I hold very dear. I also am very delighted to have my family here at table number 2 over there. My sister, Mildred Castro, her daughter, Valerie Castro, Janice Masazumi, Sharon Sawai, my 2 nieces, Glenn, who I think is probably listening to a ball game, my nephew, my cousin Patricia, and my really good friends, Louisa Moore, Donna Smith, Vicki and Ron Hansen, and none other than Arita Kroll. I'm so happy to have you all here. I'm delighted. And thank you very much for this honor.
I'm very pleased to welcome to the podium our next presenter, Dr. Nancy Meyer-Adams. Nancy is the director of the School of Social Work at Cal State Long Beach.
Thank you all very much. It's quite an honor, and I have the distinct pleasure to introduce Dr. John Oliver today. Although I know many of you, and I have to read because I'm just so nervous I'm going to forget something, so I'm sorry. Although I know many of you already know John very well, and probably for a much longer period than I have, I am thrilled to have this opportunity to highlight just a few of Dr. Oliver's accomplishments as we honor him today. I've been so lucky to have John Oliver as a mentor for over the past 13 years, and I know that many of you in this room have also had that pleasure and honor. I'm sure you would all agree that it is truly a life-changing moment to have John be your mentor. And in fact, I believe that Dr. Oliver started mentoring me on the day of my job interview at CSULB. So I'm just really glad I got hired so that the relationship could continue, because I was so impressed with him that day of my interview in 2005. Dr. John Oliver devoted his career to the promotion of social justice. His academic and social work practice activities centered on methods of redistributing societal resources that maximize opportunities for individuals and community development. He is a lifelong advocate and contributor to the knowledge base of policy practices that emphasize inclusion and social work collaborative models. Professor Oliver's interest in applied research has resulted in the development of a range of policy enactments that directly impact housing, homelessness, human service delivery systems, service accessibility, diversity training, recruitment, and workforce development. He truly just is an amazing social worker. During an active social work practice and academic career that exceeded 4 decades, Professor Oliver developed and implemented a broad array of community advocacy groups and educational enterprises. You just heard that Cal State Long Beach was part of the original IUC, and that had a lot to do with Dr. Oliver. Select examples of his policy practice accomplishments include the development of several food co-ops, fair employment organizations, 3 chapters of the National Association of Black Social Workers, university and community self-help groups, and the implementation of the initial Los Angeles County Adoption Consortium. Professor Oliver was employed as a professor of social work and senior administrator at 4 universities over the period of 36 years, and he was honored with a Distinguished Teaching Award at every university where he taught. He's been the recipient of many awards that are listed in the program today: the UCLA Distinguished Alumni Award, the NASW Lifetime Achievement Award, and the National Association of Black Social Workers Outstanding Contributions to the African American Community Award. And that's just a few. They're all listed in the program. It's truly impossible to really state or understand the number of students that he has helped to become professional social workers through his teaching, development of programs, and community organizing. Specializing in planning and policy development, John Oliver implemented programs, policies, procedures that radicalized existing degree programs that offering radicalized existing degree offerings while significantly altering faculty, student, and staff ratios. Just a couple examples of those. Just while he was at CSULB, he was involved with the creation of the CalSWEC Aging Initiative and the development of Taiwan's Gerontological Society. He was the principal organizer and major contributor to the development of MSW programs across the state through the CSULB Distance Education Program. Those programs, those MSW programs include Humboldt, Chico, East Bay, Bakersfield, and San Marcos. And we are currently still doing this model in Sonoma and Ventura. And so we are building the workforce of social workers around the state, and especially in public child welfare. And that all really is because of a vision that John had many years ago. He also conceptualized and implemented the Los Angeles County Welfare Adoption Initiative. He chaired the Development Committee of the California State Legislature's Master Plan for Social Work Education. He developed and he's still developing a variety of community self-help, political advocacy, and empowerment groups. He also continues to mentor not only myself, but other new chairs and directors of social work programs across the nation. Now, does that sound like somebody who retired 8 years ago? He continues to do great things, and he really, truly is an inspiration to us all. Professor Oliver's career was characterized by an ongoing commitment to social work education, the organized profession, and the oppressed and underserved communities. His contributions to the profession have been significant and are way too numerous to mention in my 5 allotted minutes today. So in closing, the most important thing I want you all to know about my guide through my career at CSULB and my mentor, John Oliver, is that he is one of the most respected, devoted, caring, patient, and committed individuals anyone could ever meet. He personifies the true meaning and the heart of social work and being a change agent every minute of every day. It is truly impossible to measure the impact this man has had on the many, many lives he has touched. Thank you for honoring John Oliver today with this truly well-deserved honor. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Professor Meyer-Adams, for your gracious introduction. To the persons and our person who forwarded my name as a nominee for this prestigious award, I am truly grateful. My personal gratitude to Professor Friend and the members of the Hall of Distinction Committee for inviting me to join you today. During my entire professional career, I have focused on activities that promote equity and social justice. A brief paragraph from one of my papers on empowerment of social workers outlines my practice ethos. A direct quote: "On the first day of my university classes, I began by emphatically stating, I am a social worker. I tell my students that when I reflect on who and what I am, it provides me with a sense of connectedness and direction. I also tell them because I am a social worker, I ascribe to select conceptualizations of our clients and their problems and reject less plausible conceptualizations. I explain that embracing our code of ethics, I am morally and ethically obligated to those interventions which are in concert with client values and aspirations, and that collectively we pursue only those outcomes supportive of their right to self-determination. I also tell students that the identified outcomes that emerge from interactions with clients must be compatible with their ethnic and cultural reality and must always promote political, social, and economic justice," end of quote. My father's mantra was, A life devoid of service to others is no life at all. The essence of social work is the provision of professional service to others. Consequently, my choice of social work as a career not only enabled me to adhere to my father's mantra, the rendering of service to others ensured that I live a rich and rewarding life. I believe that all professional honors are the results of a collective effort. Professional accolades belong to the collective, not to the individual. Therefore, in concert with this belief, I am privileged to accept this honor for my primary role models, my parents, Robert and Annie Louise Oliver, who provided unconditional love and taught me the value of family. My secondary role model and mentor, Nancy Elizabeth Rainville Oliver, my wife, backbone, my heart. My circle of friends who nourished me and provided ongoing guidance and encouragement. I am because we are. I am because we are. I accept this honor also for social work practitioners who instilled in me a sense of pride and honor to call myself a social worker. I also accept this honor for faculty colleagues, students, and staff whose brilliance, sacrifice, and creativity inspired me. You taught me that teaching and learning must always be a parallel process. Go Beach. And lastly, I accept this honor for my families of orientation and procreation. It is your light that has illuminated my path. Together we have always embraced our truth, that no conceptualization is unattainable. No conceptualization is unattainable. In my opinion, there's no greater honor than for my peers to confirm that personal efforts to serve have not only been noticed, but have been deemed to be of value. The looking glass that you have supplied on this occasion provides an immensely satisfying reflection that will be etched in my memory forever. As in my custom, I extend the traditional greeting of peace and remind you and myself that freedom is in our hands.
And now, introducing our next inductee is Bill Watanabe. Bill was a founder and executive director of Little Tokyo Service Center, a culturally sensitive and innovative organization serving the needs of the Little Tokyo community for more than 32 years. Welcome, Bill. Bill, there you are.
Just so you know, graduate UCLA 1972 with my MSW. I say that for people like Alex Norman and Jonah, you know. I started at Little Tokyo Service Center in January of 1980. LTSC back then was a brand new organization. We had just gotten started. We had no budget, no program, no office. But we did have a very strong board of directors. They were activists. And we wanted to start an organization that would be comprehensive, multi-purpose, providing competent services for the community. Now, Yasuko Sakamoto was hired as our first bilingual social worker in October of 1980. As I got to know her in those early days, I was very impressed with the fact that here she is from Japan, and she went to Meiji University, one of the biggest and prestigious universities in Japan. And for her undergraduate thesis, her topic was African American literature. Now, again, she's a Japanese young student. She needed an advisor, a faculty advisor, and found out that at Meiji University there was no one who had that expertise to supervise her work. I think that kind of shows someone who is willing to be a trailblazer and willing to move in uncharted places. Yasuko met her husband, Walter Kowalczyk. They exchanged letters, they became pen pals. It's quite easy to imagine how a young man with hormones would be smitten by exchanging letters with this bright, intelligent, vivacious young woman. And so they married and settled here in Southern California. But it's kind of funny because Yasuko would always just use her name Yasuko Sakamoto because Kowalczyk is kind of a hard name for Japanese folks to pronounce. And so everyone always just called her Yasuko Sakamoto. So whenever Walter would come to the office, and if he met someone who didn't know who he was, he would say, "I'm Mr. Sakamoto." And, so it's kind of funny. Now, Yasuko got her MSW in 1983. Actually, I don't know how she did it. She was working on her master's. She was working almost full-time at the service center and starting a family and making sure Walter got fed. So it was just something difficult for anybody to juggle, but here she is, again, a young lady from Japan to do all this. As she was working at LTSC and focusing on families, she became quite focused on how do we provide culturally appropriate services. In LA County, as you all know, one of the most diverse areas in the world, providing culturally appropriate services is not an easy thing to do, but something we have to do if we're going to provide services in this community. Now, back in the early 1980s, culturally appropriate services was still a relatively new concept. Not so much today, but it was back then. Again, she was blazing a new trail, going into some uncharted areas. When Yasuko was hired, my board president, a fellow by the name of Mike Morase, he came up to me and said, "Bill, you have to remember you are not the most important person at LTSC. Yasuko is the most important person at LTSC." I didn't quite appreciate that at the moment, but I had to agree that in terms of providing services, she was, of course, of ultimate importance. She set the standard for LTSC in terms of how do we provide quality services. I could tell you many stories of Yasuko's work, her compassion, her courage, her competence, but because I don't have a lot of time, I won't. But I will say that I was so struck by sometimes walking down these SROs with dark, long hallways. And I say dark, it was also very dangerous and kind of scary. But she would be in there knocking on doors, talking with clients. I would go there, although actually I think she was protecting me more than I was doing the otherwise. But we would go there and I thought, gosh, she's got so much guts, so much courage. Working with homeless families and families suffering from domestic violence, all of these things that she would just put herself out to provide the best services. People in LA County Mental Health, she was advocating for culturally appropriate services. People with the Asian Pacific Planning Policy and Planning Council, and particularly with the Alzheimer's Association, both here locally as well as speaking at national gatherings for the Alzheimer's Association. People from Japan would come to Little Tokyo Service Center so they too could learn from Yasuko Sakamoto. After 32 years working together, I retired back in 2012, and as we were a team that whole time, and in 2016, Yasuko also retired. So it is my honor to introduce to you a colleague, a teammate, a professional, compassionate person who is also in many ways a trailblazer charting new courses for all of us, and most deserving person of this recognition, Yasuko Sakamoto Kowalczyk.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have to wear glasses. Bill, I did not give you the permission to talk about pen pal part. That was a secret. Anyway, Bill, thank you so much for your kind introduction. And then I would like to thank the committee for selecting me and congratulate the, also I would like to congratulate the fellow awardees for this recognition. Also, before I forget, I want to thank everyone who helped me while I was working at the Little Tokyo Service Center. I am accepting this recognition on behalf of Little Tokyo Service Center, parentheses, LTSC, that's the abbreviation. That gave me greater opportunities to create and provide needed services. Like Bill said, the 1980, we didn't have much services. And with the Japanese culture, Shaman Guild, a lot of Issei, the first generation of Japanese Americans, didn't really seek the welfare. Sometimes they even thought,
excuse me, can I put this down just a little bit?
The Issei generation who were over 70 years old after working so hard as an immigrant, they even thought the Social Security benefit they earned was a welfare. So anyway, we were kind of required to do a lot of community education. Going back to the Little Tokyo Service Center, that I worked with, I could not have done this job without working with fellow social workers as a team, supporters in the community, and the deep understanding of the LTSC board members. Most importantly, the Bill Watanabe and current Executive Director Dean Matsubayashi's leadership. It's very, very important. Little Tokyo Service Center has provided the safe and supportive work environment so everyone was able to work to their fullest to serve the community. The next, I would like to also accept this award in honor and in memory of the Issei, the first generation Japanese pioneers who worked hard despite the low wages, sounds familiar, right? Overcame severe discrimination to establish the Japanese American community and rebuilt the community with a few resources after leaving their internment camps after World War II. I saw their dignity and I saw their pride while they were talking about their first-hand stories. The Issei pioneer through utilizing the service we just started, Issei Pioneer, that taught us how important it is to understand the needs of culturally sensitive and linguistically appropriate services among the monolingual Japanese speaking. And then here, I'd like to ask LTSC staff, raise your hand so that the audience can recognize who you are. Thank you. My initial dream was to become an English teacher and teach English in my hometown, Iwaki, Fukushima, Japan. But I felt a strong calling to help my students with the emotional issues. I went back to college and graduated with the bachelor's degree in sociology back in 1975 and became a caseworker to help inpatient at the Tokiwadai Mental Health Clinic in Tokyo. I learned social work 101 while working there, and then I was so fortunate to learn that. I came to the United States in summer 1976, and in 2 years, I got the position at the Asian Social Service Agency called Oriental Services, OSC. Jane, do you remember? Then in 1980, like Bill mentioned, I was hired as the first bilingual case manager at the new agency called Little Tokyo Service Center. I was very happy because I simply wanted to work in Little Tokyo helping the Issei pioneers. LTSC was established with the purposes of becoming the comprehensive one-stop multi-purpose social service agency with a focus on supporting people with low incomes and limited English proficiency. I joined LTSC along with Evelyn Yoshimura, who still works there. Evelyn Yoshimura, who was the office manager. Before we were hired, Bill just got by the, this is very funny, got by with a desk, telephone, the 2 chairs, and the typewriter. After receiving the furniture donated by local banks and in other businesses, it began to feel like more like an office, wasn't it, Bill? Together with 3 original LTSC, the staff began to provide services to the community. We started without the help of Google website and the computers. We primarily assisted Japanese and the Japanese immigrant and residing in Little Tokyo neighborhood. Then I meant the Japanese and the Japanese American and the Japanese immigrant. And as LTSC developed the services, we uncovered the more needs and created the new programs in response. One of them was an establishment of a 24-hour bilingual Japanese and English telephone hotline manned by the bilingual volunteers providing information and referral to the community. And that was very needed in the Japanese American community. And volunteers was very, very busy. After nearly 40 years, they opened in 1980. After nearly 40 years, LTSC has grown to over 100 employees and created many needed programs to serve a vibrant and multi-ethnic Little Tokyo and as well as Japanese and the Japanese American throughout Southern California. Julie, I excerpted this one from our newsletter. After over 40 years, I still love being a social worker, and that I am very proud of being a part of the social workers like you who work compassionately and with care to help people in the community in need. I can go on, and I don't think you'd like to hear more. And you can also go on the website. Before my time expires, then probably expired, I would like to thank my ex-coworkers, teachers, friends in the community, relatives, and family for all your support. Thank you so much for coming today.
Monika White is our next presenter. Monika was formerly president and CEO for the Center for Healthy Aging, and she was an adjunct professor at USC in both the schools of social work and gerontology. Also, Monika was a founding member of the Hall of Distinction Committee and served as president of the CSWA for several years. Monika? There you are.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be up here and look out at all the smiling faces. See longtime friends, you notice I didn't say old, and meet some new ones. It's my privilege today to introduce the next honoree, June Simmons. If you don't know her, you probably know of her. She's widely recognized in the fields of health, in the field of aging, and the field of social work. You could say that she may be the social worker we all want to be, because she does everything. Clinical work, program, policy, professional development, research, writing, publishing, consulting, teaching, mentoring, and so forth. Some of you, maybe one or two of you out there might say, what, she doesn't know what she wants to do? The truth is that everything she does and has done and continues to do is either the current or long-term benefit to vulnerable populations. And that's the prize that she keeps her eyes on, is, what do people need? Who needs it? How can I get it to them? How can we get it to them efficiently and effectively? And to me, that's what June is all about. Sorry, I have some allergies here. So she has decades of experience, and I'm not going to say how many. And a lot of what she has accomplished is in the category of one of the first or the first social worker to do a whole range of amazing work. She was the first social work director at Huntington Hospital. She was certainly one of the first, if not the first, to develop and oversee comprehensive senior services out of a nonprofit venue for the entire community, not just for patients of hospitals, but for everybody out there who needs it. She was, I believe, the first social worker to even care about long-term care insurance for older adults. And the work that she did in that area remains today and have really impacted the industry altogether. She may be certainly one of the first, if not the first, social worker to run a VNA, Visiting Nurses Association. And the list really goes on. The adjectives we could throw out about June, the list is too long, and those of you who know her know those. But I think it's her ability to identify needs and then inspire staff, funders, healthcare providers, other social workers, volunteers, families, and even clients to join her in getting the vision implemented. And there's many, many examples of that. Now, June and I go back a long way. We both worked at AYWCA many years ago with kids. And then eventually, she invited me to work with her. And we developed some programs. Some of them were simply too early. We're both seeing some of the things that we did way back then now be almost ordinary programs. Of course we do that, but some of them were too early. Others continue in one form or another. We had 10 years, almost 10 years together, very exciting times, prolific times, and really included work like working on GSWEC, getting the Senior Care Network going. Again, in long-term care insurance and other programs that to this day benefit vulnerable populations. So there's a lot more I could say, but it's hopeless. I would need to take your whole evening. But I do want to share with you a couple of lessons that I learned from Jude, from working with her, that have taken me into my career from then on. And here they are. A good idea will out. If you've got an idea and it's a good one, you're going to eventually see it implemented. It just will happen. If someone says no to you, they just got up on the wrong side of the bed that morning. I learned that. And finally, one that I have practiced over the years is you want to surround yourself with smart, caring, knowledgeable people so that with the same vision and the same eye on the same prize, and there's almost nothing you can't accomplish. June?
OMG. Can you believe her? Monika's a wonderful example of that positive change, being on a quest to see unmet needs in populations and bring new services and change the way organizations work, that it's all about who's with you, following the same dream. And you've been hearing these wonderful pioneers, and I do want to thank all of you for this recognition of our work. And I want to celebrate that we capture our history. Actually, I was there too, and we were part of a group that founded the Hall of Distinction, not expecting to be inducted into it. But I think it is wonderful you can hear these heroes and you can hear the dreams they've had, and where there was nothing, how they have put something that touched life after life after life, and really changed the course for all the people that they serve. And all of us, of course, we come from our education. You know, I'm a graduate of USC. I was kind of shocked to see them list the year. Some of my staff said, "How old are you?" I told them I graduated when I was 10. Actually, I'm proud of my age, I just never mention it. But Dr. Barbara Solomon was a hero of mine at that time, and has actually followed and mentored and supported and advocated and helped for all the causes that we have fought for. And Dr. Bruce Jansen actually was an early mentor and gave me, with terror, I don't look like it now, but I had terrible stage fright, put me on my first national conference. So all along a path, a wonderful path, as Dr. Oliver said, it's a privilege, you know, to live a life with meaning and purpose that's true to your values, and how fortunate. Laura Trejo said, she told the mayor recently, you know, you shouldn't be paying me because it's too much fun doing what I'm doing. Because we really, you know, have the pleasure of following our heart. It's a quest. I can remember being actually at the line doing social work when I first went to Huntington Hospital. The Joint Commission on Accreditation told them they had to have one. They had to have an MSW. They said, okay, but we don't want too many. But at the bedside, you find these people who should have never gotten sick like that, and who then are faced without the right resources and not able to have a post-hospital safe life and recovery, impacting them and the families that love them. And so we were early, but we've spent decades trying to take healthcare dollars and spend them on real people and the other things, the social determinants of health that drive health outcomes. So I feel very privileged to have had that work at Huntington, and then to enjoyed this wonderful work that I'm still thriving on at the Partners in Care Foundation. And so I thank everyone along the way, but especially I have some team members here. One, we have a model. You know how you see people that have something? And I saw Jane Hurd, who was one of the first non-religious hospital CEOs, and she had an administrative partner that she had had for 25 years, and I said, wow, that would be fantastic to have that kind of in-depth partnership. We really know each other. So Sylvia Whitaker is here, who has been with my side 33 years through thick and thin. Neither of us is thick, neither of us is thin, but we have been on all kinds of adventures, and of course, my spouse, who co-founded Partners in Care with me and makes it possible to have these wonderful adventures and created great work on her own, Jody Dunn. Thank you, Jody. Dr. Oliver said it well, my heart. And then, of course, I have staff here. I have Anwar Zawahid and Diane Davis, who are passionate, key leaders to move the healthcare dollar to real people's real solutions so their health comes out better. And Karen Schneider, our brand new, see her afterwards, she'll pick your wallet and help you invest in our work. She's, so we have the privilege, and I always think that the first form of wealth is the company you keep, and so I keep great company. I've been privileged by great company. We have all great company this evening. And so we remain on the quest. It's the social work quest to touch lives, to alleviate suffering that should not occur. And so my motto is, number one, it's never not worked out, so you can take the risk, because it always works out. And number two, no does just mean it's a much longer discussion than you were planning on. So in these times, we won't take no for an answer, and we will vote. Thank you for this honor.
Our final presenter for the afternoon, Dr. Melinda Hohman. Melinda was most recently director of the School of Social Work at San Diego State University. And we thank you so much for making the long drive to be with us tonight, Melinda. Melinda, you are right here.
Just want to take a minute. For the first 5 years of our marriage, my husband is here with me tonight. For the first 5 years of our marriage, my husband is here with me tonight. We lived about a mile from where the synagogue was today, where there was the shooting. And in between where we lived and the synagogue was Fred Rogers. So we lived in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. I'd like to take a minute, just a moment of silence, to think about all the victims today and the state of what's going on in our country right now. Thank you. Didn't expect that to happen today. I'm very pleased to be here to introduce our next inductee, Diane Takvorian, but I'm going to put on my teacher hat for a minute, and I wanted to ask some questions of the audience. Who here is concerned about climate change? This isn't a tough crowd on this one, that's for sure. Okay. What about environmental problems? Okay. Now, would you say, is your concern a personal one, or is it a professional one? Okay. Because many people say, well, what is the role of a social worker in environmental work? And is there a role? And because of our inductee here, I want to say a resounding yes, there is. Something I learned from Diane is about the intersection of low-income minority communities with environmental issues, causing disproportional impacts. Working to ameliorate these problems is known as environmental justice. Our awardee, Diane Takvorian, has been a social work leader in environmental justice for over 30 years, not only in San Diego, but in the Tijuana area, in California, and nationally. As I said to her this afternoon, I think she was about 30 years ahead of her time, for sure. Diane was born and raised in Pasadena and got her undergraduate and graduate MSW degree from San Diego State University. She also was a former lecturer for us and lectured on macro practice. She has been and is the executive director of the Environmental Health Coalition in San Diego, which is one of the largest environmental agencies in the country. Since the early 1980s, she has provided leadership and organizational skills in low-income communities in the San Diego-Tijuana region, resulting in pollution reduction, increased transportation availability, and community leadership development. One of her agency's first successes under her leadership was to secure the first community right-to-know law in the nation, to help residents have information about chemicals that were being used and stored near businesses in residential areas. And I heard Diane guest speak in one of our undergraduate classes, and she talked to the students about how they worked to remove a car painting business that was next to a school. And the children be out on the playground smelling all the fumes. And how, because of the community, it did not have the proper zoning laws. And her lesson in all of that is that it worked, and we were able to get the zoning laws changed. But guess what? It took 10 years. Macro social work is a slow process. Her agency has recently released its environmental justice assessment as part of the city's climate action plan, so you can see the centrality of the role of her agency in the San Diego region. Her work continues to address parks, affordable housing, solar energy, and transportation justice. Diane is a co-founder of the California Environmental Justice Alliance, which is a statewide coalition of 6 grassroots organizations that advocate at the state level for equitable policies that impact the environment. She has served on numerous boards nationally. She was appointed by President Clinton to serve on the Border Environmental Cooperation Commission, and President Obama appointed her to the Joint Public Advisory Committee of the Commission for Environmental Cooperation. In 2016, Diane was appointed to one of 2 environmental justice seats on the California Air Resources Board and was recently reappointed by San Diego-based Senator President Pro Tem Tony Atkins. She has received numerous awards, and here are 2 examples. And she received the 2017 KPPS Community Hero Award for her work in environmental sustainability, and last month, she received the Distinguished Alumni Award from San Diego State University, where she accepted that on behalf of our College of Health and Human Services. She is a role model and an example of a macro social worker who has applied her social work skills and values to a non-traditional area of social work practice. She frequently guest speaks, as I said, at San Diego State, inspiring students to think about taking a similar path in environmental work, and she has opened her agency for student internships, of which our students have participated and become very involved in environmental work as well. But the bottom line is her goal has always been to empower communities to develop their own leaders to address common problems. Diane Takvorian is an extremely influential social worker, and we were proud to nominate her for this award due to the extraordinary difference that she has made in thousands of lives. Thank you, Diane. Come on up.
Later, I guess. You good? Okay. Thank you. Wow. Thank you so much, Mindy. I really want to express my deep appreciation to you, and I had some things I wanted to say about thanking you for this extraordinary honor and for taking the time to make the nomination. And I think you all learned who Mindy is by her opening remarks of remembering people who are no longer with us as a result of a terrorist action and something that shouldn't be happening in our country today. So thank you, Mindy, for that. Really, really appreciate that. I want to say that I feel like you're one of the few people who really get it. You're the one from the School of Social Work who really made the connection between environmental racism and social work, and the fact that we needed to put those together. And I'm very grateful for that, and I feel like it's been transformative for us to really integrate environmental justice work and social work. So thank you so much, both for the nomination as well as for what you've done at San Diego State to really change the curriculum. I want to thank the San Diego State School of Social Work, because that's where I came from, for an opportunity to learn about the roots of injustice that I was pretty enraged about by the time I got there. And I really wasn't sure what I was going to do about it, but people said social work, that's a good place to go, and that's somewhere that you can put your energy. And I have to thank 2 mentors that I met there and who shaped my education, and who I've now come to understand really shaped my life. And both of them passed away this year, Maria Sardinas and Jim and Jamian. And Jim's wife, Concha's here. And I didn't know she was going to be here. So thank you so much for being here. And I wasn't going to do this. So I'll forever be grateful for the opportunity to have learned from them. And being singled out for an award is awesome, and it's also incredibly awkward, I think, because as we all know, beyond individual achievement, it takes a village to accomplish most things. And for me, I'm very sure that I would not be here tonight with one person who has been my partner, my soulmate, my unconditional partner and supporter throughout my journey. And my husband, Bob Bray, is here. And he's remained steadfast in his support for me and for the efforts with Environmental Health Coalition through very difficult times. From very public criticism that we've had for our work, to very meager budgets, to stunning defeats, and my very best cheerleader when we've had incredible victories. So in his own right, and with all due respect to everyone else in the room, he's the very best clinical social worker. He's always looking for a way, the more effective way to help people with the worst trauma they have in their lives. So thank you very much. In many ways, my path was not certain at all. I'm the grandchild of survivors of the Armenian Genocide and the first person in my family to attend college. My maternal grandmother, having witnessed the murder of her father and her brother, a death march through the desert, and 2 years of internment, somehow had the wherewithal to lift me up. At age 12, I had this assignment to interview a person in a vocation I might like to pursue, and somehow I chose a social worker. But I needed a ride to the office to interview this person, and my parents were not all that thrilled with the choice. So they weren't offering that ride. But there was my grandmother. She took me there, she drove me there, she waited in the car while I did the interview, and then she drove me home, and she peppered me with questions about what in the world was this social work, and why was I interested in doing that. And I don't remember a lot about the actual interview, but I do remember that it was clear that I would have a choice. I would have a choice about what I wanted to do with my life. And I think that's the principle that I took into developing and founding Environmental Health Coalition. And I feel like the Environmental Health Coalition team is standing here with me tonight, a team of social workers, public health professionals, women and human rights activists, and most importantly, community leaders. Our village comes together to make the most fundamental changes that enable people to live and raise their families in a just and healthy home and community. Environmental justice, environmental justice is defined as the right of all people to live, work, and play in a safe and healthy environment. And that's taken away from some people because of environmental racism and the misuse of power that puts people of color and low-income people in harm's way at a greater rate than others. In the United States, race is the single most reliable indicator of the location of a hazardous waste site or of a polluting industry. Race is the most reliable indicator. That was true in 1985 when that data point became known, and it's true today. For instance, in San Diego, children in the most impacted communities like Barrio Logan, National City, City Heights, have 3 times the rate of asthma than the county average. And what are the culprits? Discriminatory land use that allows polluters to be right next to homes and schools. That doesn't happen in most neighborhoods, but it happens in our communities. Air pollution from cars, trucks, buses, and the lack of, public transportation. Polluting industries like refineries, shipyards, and manufacturing without proper controls. And what are the solutions? Community action and community voice. Our mantra, the environmental justice mantra, is we speak for ourselves. So community members have to be lifted up and go through leadership development programs and have the opportunity to speak their truth to decision makers and leaders. And they then become the leaders, the courageous leaders that fight for those tough changes in justice. So somebody gave a microphone to this social work organizer, so sorry y'all, but how many of you have voted already? And how many of you are going to vote? Come on, every hand has to be in the room. I would expect nothing less. And I'm sure that you all know that this election is too important to stop there. Concha just told me she called her family in Texas. So you got to call your family in whatever district is most important and tell them they have to vote. We cannot let this election go. Make the call, knock on the door, send the email or the social media, whatever works for you. You're the trusted messenger. You're the one that people believe in. You're the one that can influence them. So after the election, we have to keep speaking up. No matter what happens, we have a goal, we have a social work vision that we have to achieve. So I want to end with a quote, not from a social worker, but from somebody who I've admired my whole career. Frederick Douglass said, "It's not the light that we need, but fire. It's not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake." I think we got it. Let's do it. Thank you all.
What an afternoon. Our inductees always shine a light on the power of individual social workers to effect change. And as we've heard today, it's individual social workers in teams with others. They reflect the potential for the social work profession to change the world. The induction ceremonies themselves inspire and make me feel good to be a social worker, a feeling I sense penetrates this room. As our event draws to a close, I'd like to thank family and friends of the inductees for sharing the experience this afternoon, Colleen Friend for her leadership and passion for this work as chair of the Hall of Distinction, to CSWA Program Manager Katie Johnson, who who every year organizes the induction event, brings it to life, and makes it all happen in just an hour and a half. And most of all, thank you to all of you who joined us today for your support and commitment to social work and the social workers in California. Before we leave, just a few reminders. Check out the online auction. Bidding closes in just 2 weeks. So if you want that Malibu trip, now's the time to go after it. And be aware that nominations for the induction for the Hall of Distinction for 2019 are now open. Deadline for submission is January 15th, 2019. Nomination forms are available on the website. Badges, we recycle. Diane would be happy about that. We recycle. Feel free to leave your badge on your table or at the check-in table on your way out. Check the Facebook page for pictures taken tonight. Our photographer will be taking more after the program, so connect with her for a group photo if you're taking a group photo. And then, on behalf of all of us, thank you and congratulations to the newest members of the Hall of Distinction. Have a good evening.